Okay, it looks like we are live. Welcome everybody to episode 8 of the Contrarian Daily Podcast. Now you might notice a couple of things very different about tonight. A, I am standing, and B, I am by myself. I've not been joined by my co-hosts Andy and Jake. Now, if you guys aren't aware, we had our Global Freedom Rally on Sunday. It was an absolutely amazing day. I think it was around 8 hours worth of speakers coming in for half an hour sessions. Jake and Andy, as I'm sure you guys would know if you go back and watch it, they co-hosted that event. And so unfortunately, Jake's a little bit unwell post-event, and Andy's had to follow up and get a few other things done as well. So tonight is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be me by myself. I'm going to be doing a lot of sharing the screen. We're going to evaluate what the Global Freedom Rally was all about. And if you're lucky, I might even bring in a whiteboard that I've got slightly off the screen as well, depending on how we go and depending on how we go with time. So first and foremost, what I do want to do is just do a bit of a recap of the Global Freedom Rally. Now, if you guys don't know what it is, I encourage you to go to globalfreedomrally.com/live, and you better go and check it out for yourself. But essentially what it is a large event we put together. Andy and I put together October last year, I think was the first one, where we did 2 days of non-stop speaker after speaker, around the freedom movements. And this year, what we ended up doing on the Sunday was a single day, because that 2 days was absolutely huge. And we had, back-to-back speakers. We heard from the likes of Pat Mesiti, we had Samir Banger, we had Darren, who's a crypto expert. We even had Dr. Peter McCulloch, the man himself, who has been on Joe Rogan and a whole bunch of other different podcasts and everything as well. We had the Primod, we had Jamal, we had Evelyn Ray, Jason Andrew, we had Maria Z, Topher Field, Carl Soda, we had Dr. Stephen Shavora, we had Senator Rennick, and also Heston as well, who I'm going to be introducing you guys to all these people. We're going to watch little clips from the Global Freedom Rally as we go. It was an absolutely phenomenal event. And so what we're going to do is, prior to this podcast, I tried to go ahead and get timestamps from the event of little clips I wanted to go through with you guys. But because the event is so long, it's really difficult to try to narrow down and get to a specific timestamp. It's an 8-hour event. So what we're going to do, and this is how much confidence I have in the quality of the content, is as we go through tonight, we're just going to pick some places in the stream, and we're going to go ahead and watch it and see what comes up from that as well. Now, one thing I just realized, we might get a bit of echo as we do. I'll do my best to try to avoid the echo because I don't have my earpiece here. One of the joys of being by myself, we can't check each other for bits and pieces. But what we're going to do is I'm just going to go across and share my screen on the Global Freedom Rally. We're going to hear first from Pat. Now, Pat Mesiti, he's a great friend of mine, actually. We go back several years. I'm very fortunate to work closely with him in a number of different areas and capacities. And his message on the Global Freedom Rally was mainly around being addicted to slavery. And so he talked about the Pharaoh and I guess the Exodus as well, and how a lot of the slaves were addicted to being slaves and wanted to go back to Egypt and live under slavery if they could just eat some food, such as, I think it was leeks and garlic water or something like that as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to jump in and share my screen here. We've got that. We've got Global Freedom, we've got Prime Water already up there. Let me just get back to Pat's. Now, again, bear with me. I am running the tech. I'm running the show and everything here by myself tonight. So just bear with me as I go and let us get stuck into this part of the Global Freedom Rally. Now, again, I'm just going to pick some random bits and pieces in here and see what we come up with.
Now, I want you to hear this loud and clear. Everyone listen to me. The issue was not whether Pharaoh was going to let them go. He fought, he squabbled, God sent plagues. Let me say it again. God allowed plagues. Let me say it again. God allowed plagues to get Pharaoh's attention. And he got harder, dug in deep, just like McGowan, just like Palaszczuk, just like Marshmallow, just like Scotty, just like Albanese. They dig in harder. The issue was not whether, listen to me where I'm about to tell, I'm going to drop a truth bomb, whether Pharaoh would let them go, but whether Israel would let Pharaoh go. They were so used to be under this this socialistic empire. By the way, if you want to know how the pyramids were built, that's how they were built. And at one point, listen to what it says. It says, Pharaoh, when Moses goes to him and says, let my people go, and the people of Israel go to Pharaoh, yeah, let us go, and let us go. He says, right, now I'm going to make you work harder. So you used to make bricks, and we bring you the straw. Now we want you to make the bricks, but go get your own straw.
All right, guys, what we're going to do is I'm going to come back to this other screen here as well. Now, again, we're just picking some random parts from the speakers here. Let me get the other view here. There we go. As we go now, again, if you want to go and watch this, please go to globalfreedomrally.com/live. You're going to be able to get each of these speakers. Now, the other thing you can do as well, if you go ahead to globalfreedomrally.com and register, we're actually going to email out each of these separate clips. Now, each of the speakers spoke for around about half an hour, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, depending on what it is. And you can let us know once you sign up on that page and register which speaker you want to hear from in particular. But we're going to send out all these individual clips to everyone as well as we go. Now, the next person we had on the Global Freedom Rally was Samir. Now, Samir, for those of you who don't know, he is the founder of Samir Banger Legal. Sorry, my apologies, Samir. And he was mainly talking about accountability. And the question was asked about whether there'd be any accountability brought to bear for the people who are in charge of all the mismanagement and all the mistakes that were made during this whole pandemic. Because again, there's been a lot of mistakes being made throughout this whole situation over the last couple of years. And his question was whether, or he was speaking about whether there would be any accountability from a legal perspective as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back over to the Global Freedom Rally page over here. I'm going to pick a random part here as well, where we actually have Samir, and we shall have a listen, and let's see what we get from here. Luck of the draw, guys.
The right process would be, but I agree with you completely. Giving people a voice, allowing people to feed back on this openly without criticism, because you're going to have people that support it, and they should be allowed to support it, and you're going to have a lot of people who don't support it, and they should be allowed to voice that. So I completely agree with you. We do need something like that. And quite frankly, I think what this period also teaches us, that our Constitution needs some amendments. It needs some strengthening. In my opinion, there are other people who don't believe that, but I don't believe the rights are as strong as.
Let's see if we can pick up that video again. I don't know what's happening there, a bit of technical issues. And let's see if we can get Samir back. Again, guys, we're just picking random parts out of this great live stream that we had, and I hope you can get the quality of what the speakers were talking about there as well. Now, I don't know why that's cut off there. Just give me 1 second while I try to figure that out. Here we go. Let me hit refresh, and let's get this back up and running.
To the Global Freedom.
The protests could have been peaceful and generally were. And also, I genuinely believe, regardless, and people can call me whatever they want, there were people sent to incite violence from both sides. And that should not be a negative on everyone else, ever. Just because one person does something wrong doesn't mean everyone who holds a similar view, for in this case, over as against the mandate, is going to.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go back past Samir now. Unfortunately, there seems to be something wrong with the internet there. But look, Samir was talking about accountability a lot, which was a very, very big theme throughout this whole event as well. So after Samir, we end up hearing from the Prime Lord. Now, Chris Cummington, he's been doing a lot of great work over this period of time. Let me just make sure I've got the right thing up here on the screen here, which I do. He's been doing a lot of great things. Now, the Prime Lord had a great message for us, and essentially what he was trying to do is make sure that we didn't forget that this is going to be a long-term game. This is not going to be wrapping up just because it seems like things are getting better from the narrative. But basically, he talked about the fact that COVID is a small part of a bigger picture. Now, he talked about also an agenda for 2030, that the way that a certain group of people would want us to live, and the fact that he is one of the people that doesn't want to live that way, and he's going to push back and fight against that. Now, what is this bigger picture that he was talking about? Now, most of you guys have probably heard of it. It's this thing here, which I'll just grab my screen up so I can get onto, so you guys can see this. So it's The Great Resets. Now, this is actually a great book. I highly recommend everyone grabs this book and reads it. This is actually by the man himself, Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of and I think the chairman of the World Economic Forum. And this is what the Prime Mod was talking about in terms of COVID being a smaller part of the big picture. Now, Klaus Schwab actually recently brought out another book called The Great Narrative for a Better Future. This one here, I think, came out this year in 2022 because obviously over the last couple of years, they've had a very, very hard time trying to control the narrative of COVID. There's been a lot of things said out there in the media that just does not make any sense whatsoever. And so he actually wrote a book to try to figure out the narrative and how to, I guess, get ahead of what's going on in the news. Now, I'm going to try to go back to this video. If we can make this work with the Prime Mod, we'll continue doing the clips. If we can't, that's A-okay. I'll just carry on and give you guys a bit of an update about the events. Let's see how we go.
Economic Forum by name, they maybe have heard of that, but they don't really understand the role that they play in our world and what they can influence and what they can change. And we're really seeing that now speed up and hit new heights. So if you jump on the World Economic Forum's webpage, you'll see on there, they don't even try to hide it. They speak about, the new world order. They speak about that. They speak about Agenda 2030, 2021, 2030 now. They speak about all these things, saying it's the way we have to move forward. We've seen what COVID could do to the economy and to the world. We need to better prepare for that. And you can see really what they're sort of targeting. And bit by bit, you can see us hitting those milestones. So they spoke about lockdowns and reducing emissions. We've ticked that box. There's been so many things, and it's all coming to fruition. And it's almost like a guide. Their website's like a guide. You can sort of see what's coming before it happens. And what's probably the most concerning thing, there's two parts of it. First is a digital currency, which they really want. And they've tried doing this back in, I think it was 2019, maybe 2019, 2020. The Australian government tried putting in a bill, and it was One Nation. Senator Malcolm Roberts and Pauline Hanson that actually stopped that from going through, from passing. Otherwise, right now, we wouldn't have cash. It'd be all digital.
Now, isn't that a scary thought if we had no cash? Now, again, the Prime Mod was talking about the World Economic Forum there and COVID being a small part of the big plan. Now, the World Economic Forum is what Klaus Schwab actually founded and I believe is the chairman of. And all the stuff he was talking about there, the plan, it is all laid out. And you can see it all on the World Economic Forum website itself, which I believe is weforum.org. And then it's also laid out in this book here as well. So people say it's a bit of a conspiracy theory and everything, but they're telling you plain and simple what they want for the future, their vision for the future. And if you don't agree with that vision, then it's important that we step up and push back. Now, after the Prime Mod, we had Dr. Peter McCulloch on the events. Now, Dr. Peter McCulloch, as I'm sure most of you guys do know, he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast. He was actually on the Prime Mod podcast before Joe Rogan, so maybe Prime Mod actually discovered him. But basically, on the event in Global Freedom Rally, Dr. Peter McCulloch revealed what I think was some absolutely terrifying data. And he went through a presentation he put together with a whole bunch of data from the slides and everything like that. It was all facts. Now, the thing that's terrifying about it, I believe, is that what he was talking about is happening. He was talking about the adverse reactions and a lot of those things from myocarditis and the heart problems that a lot of people are having, particularly the young men. But the thing that I find that I find more terrifying about this fact is the fact that it's not being talked about, all right, out there in the media, and it doesn't seem like there's much being done about all these things as well. Now, that is the terrifying part of everything that Dr. Peter McCulloch was talking about. Now, I'll go back over to this Freedom Rally page over here, and let me try to grab another segment from Dr. Peter McCulloch here. We'll try to get, here we go.
And so all the vaccine manufacturers are scrambling to try to come up with new vaccines. The other thing we've learned with the vaccines is they're not sufficiently durable. So all the manufacturers agree that boosters are needed. So if one elects to take a vaccine, there's not going to be a very long period of time of coverage, particularly if a new one comes for Omicron. And then the last point I want to do is turn my attention to safety. Since there's so many young men here on the call, I want to just show a few data slides on myocarditis. And so let me...
Okay, what I'll do is I'll pause it there. So if you guys want to see those data slides that Dr. Peter McCulloch is talking about, go ahead to globalfreedomrally.com/live. And just if you want to just get to Dr. Peter McCulloch's session, he's at 2:05, 2 hours in, 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 18 seconds is where I pause the screen there. So if you do want to go and check out those slides, make sure you do go across to globalfreedomrally.com/live. Now, after Dr. Peter McCulloch, we actually heard from crypto expert Darren Jenkins. Now, Darren Jenkins, he spoke at our last Global Freedom Rally event in October last year. And Andy was saying he's actually the most asked for and asked about speaker that we had. Now, last time we had people from all around the world, including Zuby, we had Jimmy Levy, we had a lot of the people, or everyone who was on not everyone, most of the people who are on this Global Freedom Rally from Sunday. And out of all those people, Darren was the most asked about. Now, I think a big part of that was because he's talking about cryptocurrencies. Now, pretty much everyone knows about cryptocurrency now. And if you don't, I encourage you to get started and get involved, because especially if you look at what's happening over there in Canada right now, with the Trudeau government in basically declaring economic warfare on the citizens by freezing bank accounts of protesters at the trucker protests and the trucker convoy. Cryptocurrency allows us a way around all those things there. Now, it's definitely by no means a perfect solution, but it does give us a way around these freezings of the bank accounts. And the other thing that it allows us to do is actually grow our wealth as well. And that's what Darren was talking about, is those two things. So in addition to that, we talked about, let me just see what else I got on my notes here. We talked about whether it was too late to get into crypto and whether now is a good time to get into it, because if you are aware of the crypto markets, they have been taking a beating lately. So they've been, I think late last year was the highest it's ever been, the market, the highest it's ever been in the past. And then now it's been coming down. And basically what he was talking about is the fact that now is the time to be getting into it. Now, he's not saying to put all your money into this asset right now. He talks about a concept called dollar cost averaging, which he'll be sharing with us a little bit further tomorrow night, which I'll talk about in a little while as well. But he was saying that now is the time to get in while the prices are soft and basically they're going up and down like this, but the general trend is down at the moment, because this is a time where people make their fortunes. It's the old adage of buy low, sell high. Okay, and so the problem is that you don't know when the low is and you don't know when the high is. Now, most people, what they do is they hear about crypto going absolutely ballistic in the prices, and then they get in. And that's not the time to get in. The time to get in is now. So Darren talked about that. He talked about a whole lot of other things as well. Let's go across to the Global Freedom Rally page and bring up a bit from Darren's session here. Let me just, let's talk about this. Let's get this going.
Why we predict will be the most scarce asset on the planet by 2024. Right now it's gold, but it will be Bitcoin because it's becoming so scarce. And that's why the most savviest investors and biggest billionaires in the world are just buying up so much Bitcoin at the moment.
Big time. And, with that as well, just, there's definitely no scarcity of dollars. They've been printing those off like there's no tomorrow. Now, can I just put you on the spot here with a bit of quick maths if we can?
Let me
just
move
ahead. So I guess one question that
is, so whilst we love Bitcoin and I'm bullish on Bitcoin and Ethereum and these conservative cryptos, we can certainly see even faster gains and more wealth.
Okay, so I'm having a bit of trouble there with my internet, so I'll bring it back again from the Global Freedom Rally page back to myself over here. Go back to solo layouts. Now, again, that's just a taste of what Darren was talking about at the Global Freedom Rally on Sunday. We only had him for half an hour, right? And so we had a whole bunch of other topics that he wanted to talk about and dive a lot deeper into cryptocurrencies and essentially what you can do with it if you want to get started and get involved. And he's actually agreed to do a 90-minute training session where he's going to go into everything he wanted to go over during this Global Freedom Rally session and a whole lot more, plus do a Q&A with anyone who wants to join. Now, if you do want to go ahead and register for that training, make sure you go to globalfreedomrally.com/Darren. And if you go ahead there, register for it. It is tomorrow night, so it's very, very limited in time. If you can't make it tomorrow night, just go ahead and register anyway. We'll send you the replay. We will not be sending the replay out to people unless they've registered for this event as well. Now, after Darren, we had Jamal. Now, Jamal has been on the forefront of the freedom movement for a very, very long time, and particularly talking about political issues and how we can get more involved politically. And his session on the Global Freedom Rally was no different. This time we talked about how we can actually affect change at the political level. And he discussed some of his content about Plan B. So if you haven't gone across and watched Jamal's content, the video I think is called Plan B, or it's a podcast or something like that. He actually explains how we can go ahead and affect proper change at a political level, which I think is absolutely phenomenal and very, very important. Now, again, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead to the Global Freedom Rally page and cross over to part of what Joel was talking about. And let's bring on Joel Jamal from the Global Freedom Rally.
How can I fight back? And over the course of the last 2 years, I've tried to provide those answers. A little bit of background. What threw me into this, as I said before, I was in construction when the government had other plans for me. I lost my job due to the lockdowns. A lot of funding with the banks ended up getting tightened up, and I got made redundant. It wasn't the mandates that got me. It was redundancy, which ended up getting me because of the lockdown. So I tried to be that canary in the coal mine, warning people this is only going to get worse. So from July 2020 to today, a year and a half, it's really been my goal to really help people wake up and arm them with skills as to how they can enact change in their democracy. This isn't something I just started learning the last year and a half. I had been studying and following politics as a hobby on the side from following the American politics. And I think a lot of people have found it really valuable to see how their democracy works. And this is ultimately what the problem is. Why are we in a situation where a pandemic can completely throw everything out of whack? Why is it that our government officials no longer listen to us? Why is it that we can't get what we want and our representatives don't listen to us? Well, it's really quite simple. And if I could use this as an example, if you look at the petitions we sign, the petitions we sign right now in Australia, the biggest one we've signed during this pandemic was 309,000 signatures. It was that the jab rollout must abide by the Nuremberg Code. That's actually not that many signatures. In fact, that was an e-petition. If you look at the past petitions in years past, they used to get millions, sometimes 2 million signatures, but they weren't e-petitions. So how did they get so many signatures, you're probably wondering? Well, it's because they had community, they had churches, they got around each other. They had a social fabric where they all looked out for each other and they looked out for their common man. It's what we call the Anzac spirit in Australia. And that was what was demonstrated in the world wars. We've lost that. And on top of that, we've actually lost our knowledge about how our society works, how the cogs of government works.
So much good information coming from Joel there during that session. And again, I encourage you, if you do want to see a little bit more of any of these speakers here, just go across to globalfreedomrally.com/live. I do tend to agree with Joel with what he was saying there. We have lost a lot of that Anzac spirit, that courage, and that fire that we're used to, that we're really known for in the international community. And I know there's been a lot of people over in America going, man, what happened to you guys? You're supposed to be the tough ones, but we've shown otherwise during this pandemic. Now, after Joel Jamal, we had Evelyn Ray. Now, Evelyn is also another person who's been on the forefront of this freedom movement for a very, very long time. She's an absolute powerhouse as well. Now, during her session, she talked about the fact that actually bringing on and moving on from the Anzac things, she was talking about the fact that we were living all the freedoms and all the good things we've got in our lives now. We've been living off the fumes of what prior generations built for us. Now, that does include, that Anzac generation who went out there and fought for freedom and fought to build this nation into something incredible. And the fact that we've been enjoying that and we've been coasting, right? And we've become a generation who are living in fear, all right? And the fact that we're not willing to sacrifice anything to maintain our freedoms. And in fact, most people are willing to give up their freedoms to have a little bit of safety, okay? And she also asked ourselves, was asking the viewers, right, to ask ourselves, what moved the men and women back in those days to act, right? And then how can we find that for ourselves as well? Now, let's go ahead and we'll find a random piece of Evelyn Ray's session, and let's kick it off again. Get the other layout here, and let's go.
And in the Western world, that's a fairly modern concept that we are only beginning to feel the devastating consequences of embracing. Previous generations, I believe, understood that. And I believe that they understood that the greatest threat to tyranny is a group of people who pledged their allegiance to something greater than the state itself. That is a huge difference with the culture back then to the culture that we see today. Now we have to consider the fruit of each system and ask ourselves what future we envision for our children. Do we want to prepare a world that values truth, freedom, virtue, knowledge, love, honor, family, motherhood, fatherhood, child rearing, godliness? Or do we want to subject them and have to prepare them for a world that dismisses truth as hate speech, that finds fact as offensive, that despises beauty, that rejects basic biology and science, that has no basis for inalienable human rights, and says that we have no inherent purpose or even accountability.
Guys, I hope you're seeing this. Every little section I'm choosing here is just full of gold. Make sure if you haven't gone and watched it, go ahead and watch this session. Now, after Evelyn, we had Jason Andrew, who's an entrepreneur down in Victoria, and he's been at the forefront as well. Like all the people we've had on the Global Freedom Rally are at the forefront of this fight for freedom. And Jason talks a lot more, or has been more involved from the business perspective, and laying that foundation. Now, on his session, he talked about, or one of the examples he brought up was of William Wallace and Braveheart, the movie where Mel Gibson portrayed William Wallace. And essentially what he was talking about is the fact that the pivotal scene, I think it was towards the end of the movie, where the Scots were up against the Brits and they were going to have a big fight to fight for their freedoms. And the Scots were tired, they were outnumbered, they were scared, and they just wanted to go home. They've been fighting for a number of years. They'd won some, they'd lost some, but overall they were still fighting and they were still outnumbered and the odds were against them. And what William Wallace said is essentially, well, again, Mel Gibson in the movie, playing William Wallace, he said, yes, you can give up and go home, but what kinds of lives will you be living? Okay, and then Jason also talked about the need for us to remember our humanity, right? And he went through and talked about how we can connect with people on a more human level so we can get through and get past any sort of divide in our views and our beliefs. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead to part of Jason's session and let's see what we come up with here.
It's just the impact that these couple of users had on me personally and also in the business. And I actually have this conversation with clients, believe it or not. Now, I just want to share something really briefly with you, which is really, I got this from a TED talk that I saw the other day, and it shows about the connection. So just see how it goes, work with me. I'm not going to be able to do it the justice that it actually has, but I think it's an important point because it's really cool. Now, I saw a talk by this guy here. His name's Tom Chi. He's an astrophysicist, and he said everything is connected. I thought, wow, that's cool. What do you mean by everything's connected? So he was talking about how there was three things. The first thing he talked about interconnection was to do with astrophysics and the stellar law. So bear with, just go with me here, okay? Because it's really cool if I can get this out right. So inside every human being, in our heart, we have iron, right, naturally.
Now, I would love to bear with Jason right now as we go, but I do have a time deadline to hold to. So again, if you do want to watch more from Jason, go ahead to the Global Freedom Rally. Now, after Jason, we ended up having Maria Z from Z Media. Now, I love Maria personally. I watch a lot of her stuff. I love her no BS approach and just how direct she is, but also her perspective, because again, she looks at things from a much bigger perspective, kind of like the Prime Mod as well. She doesn't just look at the COVID situation. Of course she does. She addresses that, but she also looks at how it fits into the bigger picture. Now, Maria brought the fire on Sunday, as she always does, and she shared more about this bigger picture and where things are moving towards. She also talked about what's happening in Canada and how smart and I guess genius and creative they are in their process, or they have been in their process, in terms of when the police said that the truckers couldn't have fuel, all the protesters got a whole bunch of different jerry cans. Some were empty, some had water, others had petrol in there, and so they found really creative ways of getting around the mandates. And she said that they're an absolute example for the world for how to actually deal with this tyranny as well. Now, I will go over to Maria's section and pull out a piece of this, and let's listen to a little bit more of what she had to say.
In a really light-hearted way, and brought some empty jerry cans and some full, and said, all right, try and figure out now which ones are full. The creative ways in which they're standing together as humanity to stand against this is so beautiful to see. And I think that the whole world stands to learn a lesson from these people. There needs to be no division. There needs to be no personal ego. There needs to be no self-interest. When you're fighting for all of humanity, you either lay your life down for these people in the way that you live every day as a sacrifice to all of mankind, or you really aren't fit for the job. And I say that because the other day I spoke with someone and she said to me, well, why doesn't someone stop this? What are they doing? And knowing the state that she was in, which was a very fragile state, much like all of mankind, she's tired. She's very psychologically worn out, which, by the way, is part of the plan. They want to wear people down psychologically. So I lovingly steered her towards the question of, well, what are you doing? Because it's easy to look at someone else and say, well, why aren't you doing more? It's easy to type in a comment when you live in the world of social media, because we've been so isolated from one another, and say, well, why didn't you do it this way? Or why didn't you do it that way? I really feel like we have better things to be doing with our time right now than criticizing the work of others who are busting their butts to try and free one another from this insanity.
What are you doing? That, I think, is a powerful question that we need to be asking ourselves as well. And the thing I love about what Maria just said then as well is the fact that it's kind of like what Jordan Peterson says. Before we go out and critique the world, we should make our own bed and fix our own backyard. And so I loved Maria's session. I love everything that Maria does and talks about. So go ahead and watch the rest of her session. It is absolutely incredible. Now, after Maria, who do we have after Maria? We had Topher Field. Right now, he's the producer and the creator of Battleground Melbourne, an absolutely phenomenal documentary about all the insanity that was happening down in Melbourne over the last couple of years. Now, Topher, during his session, he reminded us that we needed to find our courage, right? And we need to ask ourselves what we're willing to risk as well, because if we don't risk something, or he was saying if you don't risk something, and he doesn't say you have to go out and risk it all, but do something. You make it riskier for those who are doing something. So those like Topher, those like Andy, those like me, like everyone in the Global Freedom Rally, and countless other people who are out there trying to push back against the tyranny and try to secure our freedoms as well. And the other thing too he talked about was finding your line. Like, what is the line? If you haven't already done something by now, asking yourself, what is the line that needs to be crossed for you to go up and take action? Now, one thing I do recommend around Topher's things, he released a video recently with a whole bunch of different marbles explaining the voting system and how we can actually make change politically as well by voting in one of the freedom-friendly minor parties, as he calls them. And he explained how preferences work. It's very, very powerful. And it also shows that we don't have to have 51% of the votes to have some sort of control and sway politically. So if you haven't watched Topher's video on this, go and look for it on YouTube, look for it on Facebook, wherever Topher is. I think it's on his website as well. And you'll see that I think it's a thumbnail with him with a whole bunch of different marbles in different boxes. It is an absolutely powerful video. Now, let's go to Topher and hear a little bit about what he had to say.
For yourself, but you're choosing the harder path for everybody else. That, I think, is where it starts to bother me. And we're now 2 years in. And the science is very, very clear now. We know how dangerous this virus is. We know how effective the jabs are. We know how disproportionate the political reaction has been. All of this is now well known, to the point that it's starting to show up in the media. That's how well known it is. And if you're sitting there going, oh, I don't want to take the risk, then what you're telling me and you're telling everybody else is that there is nothing you're willing to stand up for. There actually isn't a point where you would go, no, I have to get into this fight. This is my fight. I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to let this happen. I have to get into this fight. If you're not at that point yet where you're willing to get into this fight, can I challenge you and ask you, where is your line? Do you have one? Or are you the kind of person who would literally let any evil happen before your eyes and you would turn a blind eye because you're afraid of what might happen to you if you got involved?
Powerful words by Topher. Absolutely powerful. And I do agree 100% with what he was saying there as well. Again, like I can't explain enough how incredible the event was, and every single speaker was delivering absolute gold in terms of information. So if you do need some hope, a bit of inspiration, and even some information about what you can do to get involved with the freedom movement, to get involved for pushing back against tyranny, and standing up for your freedoms, the freedoms of the families, those around you, your children, if you have them, I highly recommend go ahead and watch that, the Freedom Rally. Now, after Topher, the lineup didn't stop. It kept on getting better and better and better. We actually heard from Carl's Soda. Now, Carl's came to infamy, or she became famous or infamous from an Instagram video. I think she did 3 or 4 of them that became absolutely viral, and she had like 40 million views on one particular Instagram post. And so she's been again, she's become very well known as a small business advocate in this whole freedom movement. She's also a professional photographer and designer. She's got some workshops coming up as well, which you can find out the information about during her session of the Global Freedom Rally. But she talked about the need for us to actually take a step back and look after ourselves, a bit of self-care, because this is a long fight. It's a war. It is not a battle. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. And so just like soldiers in warfare, there are times when they need to go back and spend some time to rest and recuperate. Otherwise, they're going to burn out because they're continually pushing and fighting. And when you do burn out, or when they burn out, they're no use to anyone, no use to themselves, no use to those around them, and no use to the freedom movement as well. So Carlos was talking about the importance of taking that break and looking after yourself as well. So with that, let's go ahead and have a look at what Carlos was saying for a few seconds, and we shall see what she's saying at this moment in time.
We're able to show up authentically as ourselves, but also without completely depleting our resources. Because at the end of the day, we only get one shot at this life. And all we have right now is the moment that we're living through. And we don't want to get that lost with other things that are going on around us. We don't want to rob ourselves from this moment. So when I talk about fatigue, I'm talking about people who show up every single day, who are constantly posting the second something happens. You know, it's wonderful that we do have social media. So we're able to go, okay, look, you know, this is what's happening today. I'm going to comment on it straight away. I'm going to be the first one to post this, the first one to share a reel about this. You know, everyone's sort of really trigger happy with making sure they're on the front line. And whilst that's important to make sure that we're covering things and that anything that we see or we're exposed to, we're able to provide that broader sense of view to people. It's also important to remember that sometimes being trigger happy is not necessarily the best solution for what we want. You know, jumping the gun and assuming things often ends up making an ass out of ourselves. We know that cliche. So
yeah, very, very powerful words from Carlos as well, as always. And it is a very, very important message, A, to look after yourself during this period of time and not get too burnt out, but also just take a second before you do share that information. Make sure you verify whatever you're looking to share out there. Now, after Carlos, we heard from Dr. Stephen Shavora. Now, he's also another personal favorite of mine. I'm saying this about, I can say this about every single one of these speakers, to be honest with you. I love every single one of them. Dr. Stephen Shavora, he's come to fame recently for his highly intellectual and well thought through communication style as he discusses everything. Now, he's a political historian and political commentator, I believe. And he talked about how the fact that we've been completely conditioned, right, into fear and dismissing anything that's contrary to the mainstream media as simply a conspiracy. Right. He also talked about the fact that this is not the end, right? And we're going to have a lot of more invasive and tyrannical government intervention as time goes on. And he explained why as well, which I thought was incredibly intelligent. And he encouraged everyone to turn up to the protests, because if you turn up to the protests, you show others and yourself that you are not alone, that you're part of a big movement. And once you know that, it gives you hope. And when you have hope, you act, right? And the key thing that Dr. Stephen Shavora said is that we need to prepare for a lifetime of fighting for liberty and against government tyranny over our lives. Now, that is very, very heavy words. I do happen to agree with him. Again, if you read this book, The Great Reset, and you look at what's out there on the World Economic Forum website, you will see the plan of what's laid out ahead of us. And you will know, and again, Dr. Stephen Shavora does a great job of explaining why this is a situation. So if you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch his session. But I do agree that we're in for a lifetime of this fight. It is not going to go away anytime soon. And let's go ahead and hear a little bit from Stephen Shavora from the Global Freedom Rally. Let's see if I can get this going. It's been working well so far. We had our issues. Let's see. Here we go.
Became so invasive in people's lives that they, and not just the Australian government, but our employers, that they sort of forced people to take vaccines that have very, very common adverse and serious, to realize that actually we're in a very, very significant moment of history. And the other thing I was noticing was that just more and more the policies that were being foisted on Australians and being foisted on people overseas were just making no sense. And a classic example for me was basically demanding that all teachers get vaccinated. And I've had friends who've lost their jobs. And I was thinking to myself, well, wait a second, what sense does it make to insist that every single teacher on a campus is vaccinated when you're literally going to have hundreds and hundreds of students, ranging from childhood to sort of, the age of 16, 17, 18, who are not vaccinated every day on the campus? Like, what difference does it really make if you've got a handful of teachers who didn't want to get vaccinated when you've literally got hundreds of other people on the campus every day? And I just realized, like, it just makes no sense. And it started to become bleedingly obvious that this policy was really not so much about safety as it was about basically coercing people to take vaccines that they do not want and that they do not need. And so again, it struck.
Powerful words again from Dr. Stephen Shivora. And look, that is just the beginning of what he was saying, or just a part of what he was saying. Now, after Dr. Stephen Shivora, we heard from Senator Rennick. Now, Senator Rennick, again, I do know for a very, very long time has been on this forefront of the freedom movement as well. We actually heard from him last time at the Global Freedom Rally in October last year, where Jake, the co-host this year, actually interviewed Senator Rennick live at the protest that was happening in Brisbane. Now, the thing about Senator Rennick on this session here is he talked and dropped a lot of facts and information, and probably the best, I guess, medical and scientific explanation of the illness, COVID, and also the vaccines and how it all works that I've ever heard before. And he proved that he knows his stuff and his facts beyond a shadow of a doubt. And it was fascinating to learn this stuff. Now, this is things that, we probably should have been hearing more from our medical community and the people in charge of the medicines and everything. But Senator Rennick had absolutely a phenomenal depth of knowledge over the illness and also the vaccines. Now let's hear a little bit from Senator Rennick and what he was talking about.
Bring more cynicism, not just in myself, but with a lot of people across the country.
And Senator Rennick, when you did what you did and came out and started advocating for people who had been injured by the vaccination, that was...
Let me just try to skip ahead to Senator Rennick here.
But I've got to be honest with you, I think it's going to be too late, to be honest. It's, this is going to take a long time for people to recover from, in my view.
And Senator, I'm wondering if you've been looking at the studies that have been coming out recently about natural immunity and the strength of natural immunity. And if you think that maybe we should be testing for natural immunity before we start handing out vaccinations willy-nilly at Bunnings.
Yeah, should have done that 2 years ago. Should have been doing that from the get-go. And there's no doubt that natural immunity is better, because natural immunity will create antibodies to all 29 proteins in a virus. The spike protein is purely one protein in a virus. So when you get that vaccine, which, mind you, is only in your blood as well, you are creating an antibody to just the one protein, right? So, the other 28 proteins in the virus, of which a large number are actually in what they call the nuclear capsid, which is the part of the virus that produces the spike protein, they still exist. So if you're giving the body a vaccine to one protein, all you're doing is encouraging the virus to mutate to create another spike protein. So you're actually speeding up the evolutionary process of the virus. Now, the risk with that in itself is that you're actually going to end up with a stronger virus one day if they keep doing this. So that in itself is quite risky. The other reason why natural immunity is better is because if you've had the virus, it's come to you via your mucosal system, i.e. through your nose, ears and throat, and it goes into, it goes down your respiratory system into your gut in a place called the Pierce patches or whatever, I think that's where it's called, in your stomach, creates antibodies, and those antibodies go back up into your lungs. Now, in many cases, it's much better to get an antibody response in your mucosal system before it actually crosses over into the second part of the immune system, which...
Again, so look, that is just a taste of what Senator Rennick was talking about. Now, just in that little section there, you can see the depth of his knowledge. And again, it just makes a lot of sense when you hear it. And again, I'd highly encourage you, if you haven't already, go ahead and watch his session from the Global Freedom Rally. Now, our final speaker for the day was a man by the name of Heston Russell. Now, prior to the event, I'd never heard of this person. I'd never heard of Heston. I'd never heard of the Australian Values Party, I believe is what it's called. And, you know, I was absolutely blown away by what Heston was talking about on the session. Now, you know, I can tell you that myself, Andy, and Jake had a lot of really positive response, and believe that, you know, Heston Russell could be a man who does a lot of really good things, a lot of really positive things. And if you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend you go and, you know, check him out. I think his website's australianvalues.org. It's a political party he's the head of and he's started. Go check out his session at the Global Freedom Rally and just go hear from him anywhere you can. This man is I believe, a 5th generation soldier, and he was a major in, I think it was the Commandos, so in Special Forces, essentially, leading a platoon of Special Forces operators, and he deployed over to Afghanistan, I believe also Iraq, excuse me, East Timor, multiple deployments. And that experience and knowledge definitely shone through. Now, he's all about leadership over politics, and I think we can all agree that we need a lot of leadership. We're sick of the politics. We've had no leadership, essentially. All we've had is a whole bunch of political games. And again, it gave, you know, myself, the three of us, a lot of hope, knowing that Heston was out there, and he's got a great team of people around him, and he just needs our help to get his message out there as well. And I highly recommend you go check him out. Now, let's just go over and cut to a section from Heston during the Global Freedom Rally on Sunday.
And really realised that COVID and what we've been through as a society has actually just really demonstrated the fractures and fault lines within this system, and that comes about from a lack of leadership.
Heston,
that lack of leadership.
I'm actually a little bit.
Yeah, you're on. So I was going to say that lack of leadership is again coming from a place whereby, you know, I spent 4 years in Canberra training before I was allowed to command 30 people in our military. Before I went out on a mission in Afghanistan, I had to provide 100 pages worth of group planning that I sat down with my team. When I was in Iraq, and we planned and took on ISIS, the modern-day manifestation of evil in 2016 and 17, we provided strategic plans 6 months in advance, how we were going to draw down from Iraq, how we were going to hand over back to the people, back to other coalition forces. And then when we had the fall of Afghanistan in August last year, and this charity that I've stepped up, Veteran Support Force, and I got to see the government basically stand up and say that this was a surprise, basically stand up and provide all these brilliant press conferences while myself and my volunteers were engaging with Australians and Afghans who are still stuck in Afghanistan. I realised that, again, our government is focused on public opinion, it's focused on media, it is focused on providing marketing messages as opposed to rolling up its sleeve and getting it done. And after having 8 separate political parties ask for me to run for them in some capacity over the last year, I decided to go through the process with a few of them, and again see that not enough are actually the people out there on the floor making the decisions. There's too many backdoor bureaucrats and party members who are more interested in their own power and their own authority. So I set about putting out a call to action to the public. At that time, they changed the law, so you needed 1,500 people to form a political party, and within 2 weeks we had 2,000 members. And as of January this year, the Australian Values Party was formed. And I'll just quickly close on the quick summary of the Australian Values Party.
Guys, I wish I could keep it playing, but again, we are running to a timetable here as well. If you do want to hear those values and you want to hear what Heston is all about, do go ahead and watch his session. And again, I hope just from that little teaser or taste you've got there from his session, you can see his leadership and his experience. Now, he's a man that's clearly well positioned to do a lot of good for us and our world. And the thing I love as well is the Australian values. Now, I think it was his session on there. He talked about the fact that when you immigrate to Australia, you actually have to sign a document with Australian values. Now, I had no idea that there was an actual document of Australian values. And if you go ahead and read it, you can look at it, look it up on the government website. I went and had a look at it afterwards. You just ask yourself if we've been living by Australian values over the last couple of years. And I would argue that we haven't. I believe Heston is arguing that we haven't. And he's actually trying to set about and try to restore those values. So if you do have any sort of attachment and belief in those values, I do recommend you go and check out Heston as well. Now, he was our final speaker from the event. Now, on the event during the Global Freedom Rally 2, which was on Sunday, we also announced a series we've got coming up, which is called People of the Pandemic. And we want to hear from you. So essentially what this series is all about is the fact that over the last couple of years, there's been that many stories and tales of devastation and businesses going bankrupt, people losing their jobs, people losing their families, a whole bunch of things that have been going on. But because there's so much news and information, we sort of forget about all that stuff that's going on. But if you go take one look around or a walk around Melbourne CBD, even here on the Gold Coast, many places in the CBD, you'll see all these different for lease signs up, right? And behind every single for lease sign is a story of a business owner and their family and their struggle to survive and them having their business shut down. So if that is you or someone who's had a situation like that, now it doesn't just have to be a business shutdown. It doesn't just have to be losing your job or employment. It could also be some sort of, adverse reaction from the vaccine or whatever else you want to talk about. We want to share your story. So if you want to, if you know someone or you yourself have a story to tell, go ahead to globalfreedomrally.com/people and fill in that short form and we'll be in touch with you as well. Now, what I'll do is actually one key theme that we had as well from the Global Freedom Rally that most of the speakers had was the fact that we need to keep our eyes up and looking towards the future. I know a lot of the COVID narrative right now is starting to fall apart. A lot of governments around the world are starting to roll back their mandates. I'm sure it'll be the same here in a matter of time. But just because these things are easing off, quote unquote easing off, it does not mean that this is over. And a great number of speakers were talking about the fact that we need to keep ourselves looking towards the future, not thinking that the worst is over and remaining ready and steadfast, ready for what is to come to us as well. And I'll do one more final call to action for Darren's session for tomorrow night as well. If you have any interest in cryptocurrency, whether that's as a source of growing your wealth, because I've seen and I've been involved with crypto for a little while now. Unfortunately, I haven't had enough exposure to the market to make life-changing gains yet, but it is on the way. I've been one of the latecomers. I only got started last year. But if you are interested in growing wealth and you're interested in cryptocurrency, or if you're looking for alternatives to the financial system, especially as what we look at in Canada, I highly recommend you go ahead and register for Darren's training. It is tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 23rd of February. If you're watching this at a later date at 7 p.m. Queensland, 8 p.m. New South Wales time, go ahead to globalfreedomrally.com/Darren. Now, with that being said, what we're going to do is go into some stuff about Canada here before we wrap up tonight's podcast. And again, hope you guys are doing okay out there. Look, it is a bit of a different format. I am by myself rolling solo here. Jake and Andy have been, they're either unwell or got a few other things they've had to deal with for this evening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and talk about Canada, right? So what is happening in Canada? Essentially, they've had their emergency powers voted through. Now, I'm sure by now you've heard, right? So Justin Trudeau invoked these emergency powers that have never been evoked ever. And essentially what it allows them to do is a whole bunch of bad stuff, including freezing the assets and bank accounts of people who they deem not worthy of them. In other words, the people who are protesting and participating in the trucker convoy, even those who have actually donated money to the trucker convoy as well, they're getting their bank accounts seized. Now, there is a story going around, I haven't verified, but from what they're saying out there is that an unemployed older lady donated, I think it's $25 or $50 to the convoy and has had her bank accounts frozen, and she's now in a lot of trouble there as well. Now, that is tyrannical and that is absolutely evil in my opinion. Now, the bad part about this is the fact that the government was set to vote on this a little while ago, but they had a lot of pushback. And so what they ended up doing was pausing or cancelling that session of government. But recently they came back into their session of government and they voted, right? So the lower house, I think their political system must be very similar to ours up here in Australia, where they have the lower house and then the laws, they get passed down here and then sent up to the Senate for final ratification. Now, they voted through, right? So they absolutely, I don't know how, but they voted through the Emergency Act. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a video here. Hopefully it's the right video of them voting this through.
I declare the motion carried.
Okay, hold on. Let me just start this from the beginning.
Yeas pour 185, 185. Nays contre 151, 151.
I declare the motion carried.
So what you've just heard there was the votes and the numbers for and against the emergency powers, and that has been passed through the lower house and is going up to the Senate, I believe, as the next steps, which is absolutely terrible. And the thing we have to ask ourselves is Canada a warning for what we've got to come here in Australia and other areas around the world? Now, again, if you read the book, The Great Reset here, I do highly recommend it. Again, the irony is we have to buy the book, right? I'm sure there might be free versions of it out there somewhere, but you've got to buy the book, which is sending money to the, to this fella here. But again, it's really important to know their plan, right? And I might actually show you guys inside this book in a second as well. Look, I believe this is a warning shot for what's happening or what will happen around the world as well. If you look at things like the ESG scores, which is environment, social, and governance score that they've been putting in place for investments, and they're also talking about putting in place for individuals as well. Just while we're on the topic of Canada, have a listen to this person here. You've probably heard of Hong Kong, right? So that's a bit of a colloquial term for supporting the truckers. Let's see what this lady has to say, who's one of the politicians here in Canada, clearly of sane mind.
Do we have to see of Hong Kong, which is an...
Let me just go over from the beginning.
How many guns need to be seized? How much vitriol do we have to see of Hong Kong, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler? Do we need to see by these protests?
Is it really an acronym for Hail Hitler? Honk, honk. This is it doesn't have a name on. This is one of their politicians over there in Canada. Can you believe the absolute insanity of this? This is insane. Now, one more thing just while we're on the topic of Canada, and I know for the last couple of years we've had a lot of, or not last couple of years, while Trump was in power, there's a whole bunch of narratives around, foreign interference with Russia and all that other stuff like that. This person here asked a question, a very, very clever question about foreign interference. And for those of you who don't know, Klaus Schwab, who is, actually, let me just see, I might just try to cue this up. Give me 1 second here to try to find this video of Klaus Schwab talking about penetrating the Canadian government. Let me just see if I can play this for you first to give you some context about what we're about to watch here. Again, the joys of being live here on the podcast and doing something on the fly. Okay. Where is the clip of him saying this? Here we go. Okay, so let me just share my screen here, and I'm going to show you. Share the screen. If I can get this right. Okay, so if we go to window and we go to this one here, let's see what Klaus Schwab is saying here.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, so that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I would know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the world economic forum.
Did you catch that, guys? At least half, probably over half of his cabinet for the World Economic Forum. Now, knowing what you've just seen there, let's have a look at what this question is all about, and let's see what their response is, and let's be the judge of what they think.
The world, he said.
Okay, here we go. So please go check this guy out on the Hugo Box.
Question commentaire, questions and comments. The honourable member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I listened to my colleague's speech. I had a constituent that wanted me to ask a question about outside interference to our democracy. Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum, and he bragged how his subversive WEF, World Economic Forum, has, quoted, infiltrated governments around the world. He said that his organization had penetrated more than half of Canada's cabinet. And I was wondering, in the interest of transparency, could the member please name which cabinet ministers are on board with the WEF's agenda? My concern is the deputy.
Order. I know he was. I know that the member was in a really good question there, but the audio is really bad, and the video is really bad as well. And I apologize. I don't know if the member. Okay, let's try again. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, that member was promoting open disinformation. That's not debate. We have to call out disinformation.
We'll get into debate again. The honourable member, questions and comments. The honourable member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm just thank you to my honourable colleague for her speech. I'd like to ask her specifically, because you talked about how this piece of legislation does not.
When I mention our names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin.
So we've just watched that clip there from Klaus Schwab as well. So look, I hope you guys caught their response. Okay, so they're saying that there was poor video and poor audio. We heard him just fine. And then they were trying to say that he's talking about misinformation and things like that. But hey, look, don't take our word for it. Look at what they've just said there as well. Now, guys, what I will just do, I'll wrap it up because we're at the top of the hour here as well. So look, essentially, Canada is, I believe, a warning for what's to come for us. If you watch the Global Freedom Rally and you see what the other speakers were saying as well, they also believe it is a warning for what's to come. Now, it might not look exactly like what we're seeing in Canada right now, but we do have things like it. Now, I've been talking about this book, The Great Reset, throughout this whole podcast. So let me just take you through and show you the contents, the table of contents, and you guys can see, get a taste of what's to come in this book. Now, we are actually doing a book review of this as well. I've been going through and reading it and taking a whole bunch of different notes. So if you don't have the time to get the book and read it yourself, do stay tuned for the book review as well. But let me just pull up my phone here and get the camera going. And then remind me later. There it is there. Okay, let's connect. And we're going to add this to stream. Why is it not going to connect? Try it again from the beginning. Here we go. Okay. You guys should see my phone coming up in just a second. Let's take that one off, actually. I'll try that screen again. Again, joys of trying to run the tech by yourself here. Extra camera, here we go. Let's get this going. Let's bring it into the stream. Let's get it over to solo. Okay, so this is through the joys of technology. My phone, you can see my feet down there, which is great. This is the Great Reset book. Now, what I wanted to show you guys while we're here is just the table of contents of this, and you can have a look at the sort of information that's in this book that I believe everyone should be reading. Now, if I just zoom in here, you can have a look. I won't read everything out there. Just have a look through and read through it yourself as you go through this. We've got obviously, defining the characteristics of today's world, the economic resets. So the book's broken down into 3 areas: there's macro reset, micro reset, and then individual reset. So on the macro level, he's talking about the economics, okay, and employment, deflation or inflation, the fate of the US dollar, societal resets, right, which is very interesting, inequality, social unrest, the return of big government. Now that one there, that particular section is highly telling. Now, the return of big government, which means essentially in that section, he's talking about the fact that governments are going to be directing businesses in a lot of ways. Now, if you look on the World Economic Forum website, they're actually talking about the cooperation of government and corporations, which is huge. Now, then he's also talking about geopolitical resets, right? Environmental resets, coronavirus, and the environment, guys. Now, that is what some people believe is going to be the next thing that's coming down the pipeline. Is once this coronavirus narrative wraps up, we're going to be moving down into the climate again. He then talks about the technological reset, the micro reset, micro trends, industry resets, right? So behavioral changes, permanent versus transients, Right, really, really interesting stuff here. Then the individual reset, redefining our humanness. Okay, the better angels are in our nature or not. Moral choices, mental health and well-being, changing priorities, nature and well-being. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in this book. We are going to be doing a book review of it. Once I've got that one there finished, I'm going to go through and get the great narrative done as well. Now, again, this one I believe came out this year, and this is more about narratives and how to control them and basically use them for getting what they want. So they're talking about obviously the social media and the age of fake news in here, the power of narratives, post-COVID issues and challenges. Again, a little bit here about the framework, economics, environment, geopolitics, society, and technology. And they're trying to give us some solutions as well. Now, let's see what's on the other page. I think that was it. No, we've got a little bit more over here. We've got resilience. We've got the role of business, technologies, exponential progress, and conclusion as well. Now, guys, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you check these books out. If you can't or you can't wait for them, stick around for the contrarian stuff. We are going to be doing a book review on this and talking about what's inside those books there as well. Now, I was hoping to go over a few other things with you guys tonight around the time frames and the fact that people waking up versus what they're implementing, and then the fact we need to slow things down and speed things up. But we're going to have to save that for another video because we have gone past the hour. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast tonight. It has been a bit of a different one. It's been myself running solo, trying to run the technology here, as you just saw that thing flash up on the screen there. Sometimes not perfectly. But with that, I'm going to wrap up the episode, Contrarian episode number 8, the podcast here. And we shall speak to you guys very, very soon. Bye for now.